Hello, everyone, and welcome to another weekly coaching conversation with GoMobi.work. My name is Wade Bruffy. I'm the co-founder and CEO of GoMobi.work. And today we have a very special presentation prepared just for you. We're going to be talking about something that is on a lot of leaders' minds lately, something that we all have to concern ourselves with if we want to be effective in leading our team, and that is the motivation of our people. So we're going to dive into one of the most compelling bodies of research, the most compelling bodies of knowledge that we are aware of and refer to all the time in the work that we do with our customers about how to create and sustain motivation on a team. So this is going to be an informational session, and it's also going to be an interactive session. So if you are ready to get started, that is great. We want you to also take out a piece of paper and get ready for the end, because we're going to have a little reflective thing for you. And today we are coming to you. It's just me today, but normally my co-founder, Zoltan Sarda, our Chief Coaching Officer, would also be present for these sessions. So if you have joined us in a previous week, thank you, welcome back. And if not, if this is your first time, thank you for joining us. We're very excited that you're here. And if you're watching this on the recording afterwards, thanks to you also. So without further ado, we will go ahead and get started. I'm going to set up my screen share. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so we're going to go into our view here. Thanks for bearing with me as we get started. And so one of the things that we talk about a lot with customers and with each other here at GoMobi.work is this principal question: what truly motivates people? It's a complex question, and what's going through your mind probably right now is a few different things. Maybe what motivates you, what you've seen motivate others, and what you believe would be effective. So maybe here's some ideas that you might be thinking of right now. Is it things like money, fame, status, image, even proving somebody else wrong? Is it something that's feels like we have to reach for it and get it? A lot of talk in our society these days about these things. Or is it more purpose, connection, mastery, freedom, self-actualization? Maybe these are the kinds of things that we would like to think are motivating us all the time, or maybe that we think are the better things to be motivated by. And we're going to get into that a little bit today. But we would describe these and characterize these, if you're familiar with motivation research at all, as extrinsic motivation and intrinsic motivation. So there's not one of these that is superior to the other all the time. They both have different uses. They both have different utility. We just need to understand what is driving us at any given time in order to know what to bring in to be more successful as a leader. Which strings are we pulling on at what time? So the answer is to that question of what really motivates people is both. There are extrinsic factors and there are intrinsic factors. Now, we do acknowledge that intrinsic factors are actually a little bit more sustainable. They're a little bit, if you will, the organic version of motivation. Because if you're using external all the time, that can be at best shallow and at worst really bad for people's mental health if you're creating an environment where it's fear driven. So we have here on our left, we wanted to start with intrinsic because we're going to be talking about intrinsic motivation a lot, how to generate that in our team today. So with intrinsic motivation, at a high level, what it's characterized by is this doing it out of your own interest, doing it out of it because it's a great thing to do, because you're engaged, because you're interested. You're doing the thing specifically because you like doing it, or it's fascinating to you. And to quote the words of a great researcher, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who wrote the book Flow, about how to create high performance situations, he would describe people that do things for intrinsic motivation reasons as autotelic. And so what that means is it's a personality who is more likely to do something for the sake of itself rather than to achieve some external goal. So these are your really curious people. These are the high performers, because these people are going above and beyond because they just can't not. They have to do it. They feel like they have to do it. So intrinsic motivation is associated with greater flow, to complete that loop. And it's also, because it's associated with greater flow, it's associated with greater presence, greater performance, greater fulfillment, ultimately. Now, if you're leading a team right now and you're a business owner, you're an executive, you are somebody that sets practices on a team. Let's use an example of pay. If you just went to everybody and said to them, you should do this work because it's interesting, but we're only going to pay you 25% of what we're paying you now. Would that be exciting to them still? No, probably not. So these things are also very important. We need extrinsic motivators as well. And so we're going to talk about how to create that balance. But one thing that we wanted to highlight is that when we skew too far towards the extrinsic motivation side, that can be really damaging for culture, morale, and ultimately performance that are affected by both of those things. And the reason for that is because, and I was just talking to a customer yesterday about this, they feel like they're in an environment where people don't want to put their name on something, because if something goes wrong, they feel like the head of the company is going to come after them for it, and he's going to bust them. And the younger leadership in the company realizes that that is not a healthy way of doing business, that they actually think our business is performing really well, but it's out of fear. And we don't want that. We think that it's limiting our ability to grow the business, because when people come in our door, they know that, oh boy, I'm going to have to like be in this environment all the time. And I don't know if I necessarily want to do that, when there's other businesses in the space where they could have the same financial results, the same success, but be in a much more supportive environment. So one of the ways that we talk about this is that it's a zero-sum game. Like that instance, if I get something, then somebody else loses. That is not very helpful. And that it can feel that way sometimes when we're talking about extrinsic rewards. I get more well-known and you get less well-known. So it's something to balance. And we're going to talk about creating that balance today. But as a general rule, think more about intrinsic as we're doing this because it's something that we're interested in, passionate about. We're doing it because it's a good thing to do, and versus extrinsic, which is highly motivated by reward or avoiding punishment. That's the difference between those two. So these things both show up for us in the workplace, and we gave the example for extrinsic pay practices before, but it can come into a lot of different forms. So you think about the processes and standards in your company; those are also extrinsic motivators, because the way that you enforce those is hopefully a supportive thing. But employees know that if they don't live up to the standards or follow processes, that there could be consequences for that. So we know that these extrinsic motivators exist. We need to be very conscientious about how we present them to people, and recognize that, hey, these standards exist so that we can be great, and so that you can come in here and consistently be great. They exist to help you. They don't exist to put you in a box or try to enforce something that is draconian. Unless that is your personal leadership style, if that's working for you, great. But we would anticipate that it's not creating the best relationship environment for you if that's what's happening. So there's some things to consider there. Intrinsic is a little bit of the opposite side of that coin. So you have your culture of learning. If you have a company if you in your company are absolutely focused on saying, if we make a mistake, we learn from it. And that's the important thing to us. We talked last week about innovation. A great innovation function in a business has to come from a sense of we are learning from failure and creating systems to document failure, creating systems to say, if this is a personal failing, what is my action plan? And it's so easy to just say to somebody, oh, you didn't meet the standard, you're going on a performance improvement plan. Like that is such the sadly norm for a lot of places. And it's because leaders aren't taught we need to do things differently so that we can actually support people to their best work. So we gave that example of innovation, and ultimately, the mindset shift that we help our customers adopt is that we need to move from this command and control management style to a coaching and mentorship management style. And that is where we're going in and saying we support each other in learning from what our mistakes, and we are also very, very focused on our ideals, our standards, because if we can really focus on our standards, we know that we'll succeed. So lots going into that. Now on the right, you can see that when we look at these sources of motivation, so when this chart is talking about the affective source of motivation. So what is this actually doing for us in our feelings and in our how we show up, the affect of ourself? So you can see in the self-determined environment, in the self-determined instance where the person is saying, I'm doing this because I'm intrinsically motivated. You see that in the positive, they're experiencing more flow. They're immersed in it because they're interested in it. Their interest and curiosity is piqued, and they're actually having fun because they're doing it and they're interested in it. So a lot of times that will happen when we're learning something new or executing at a high level on something that we're already good at. If you look at the conditions that lead to flow, one of them is that we are in an environment that is demanding of us. We actually need that challenge or else we'll get bored. So flow doesn't happen in an easy environment. Flow happens in an environment that is challenging. It's challenging almost to the point of that we actually need to even develop our skills a little bit more to be executing at the truly excellent or perfect level. And so that it's that full engagement that creates the flow. So absolutely not saying that people should always be doing things for just for fun. Obviously in the business environment, that isn't going to be always the case, but at the very least, to access flow, let's make it using all of their skills. So there's that. And people like to use their skills. So that makes it fun in itself. So nice little positive feedback loop there. But in the negative, we have the person who is self-determined. When they fail, they have to cope with that failure. So ultimately, that can lead to a little bit of disengagement. Ultimately, if they realize, hey, like I just am not as good at this as I thought I was going to be. Maybe there's some disengagement there, but we really need to help that person then learn that they can grow. And so whether or not that's a skill that they want to keep on developing or somewhere where they just realize like this isn't for me, either of those things is okay. And so even in the negative, when something negative is happening, the person doesn't perceive a threat from their team, their employer, their leader, because that leader is supporting them in a process of figuring out what is that thing that we're good at. We're going to try things. Jeff Bezos is an example of an incredible leader on this front because he is constantly encouraging Amazon employees to try things that don't work. I guess something that's recently in mind is that they had the whole Alexa team, and yeah, a lot of people got laid off recently, but think about the number of years from since that product came out to where it's been and the number of people that have tried working on that. And then they recently decided, hey, we need to shift our focus away from this. And it's okay that it didn't work out as we thought it was going to, but we tried, we gave it our all. So that's an example of somebody that is saying, for now, it's okay that we didn't do that. Maybe we'll pick that project back up later on when the environment improves a little bit. But somebody that's actively encouraging their employees to go out and try things that don't work, super valuable. So now in the incentive side, the standards of excellence are something that we champion. This is part of our core idea of how our software works, and it's a core idea of everything that we encourage people to do, is to actually go through and set up standards for excellence. So few companies actually do a description of what does excellence look like in this particular role. And it's so important. And this goes beyond the job description. This goes beyond you are able to have high-level conversations with C-level executives in an advisory capacity. Like that's what you read on the job description. That's a great thing. People need to be able to identify, hey, am I able to do this job or not? However, when they sit down at the desk on day one, are they aware of the specific kinds of things that are unique to your team that maybe don't exist in the team that they're coming from, that you need them to do in order to fit in with the culture, to achieve the level of performance, the unique flavor that you want to impart upon people as people buy how you do stuff more so than they buy what you do. So even if you have the same exact product, if one person is doing it in a much better way, in a way that people jive with a lot better, that business is going to get more business. So these are something that we absolutely celebrate. And once again, we're talking about the balance between the intrinsic and the extrinsic. So this is one of the ways that we can do that. Now, in the negative, this is where people have trouble. And this is where leaders can get into a really bad cultural experience, as I was just talking with somebody yesterday about. If there is over focus on achievement and there's over focus on doing everything right, being the best, being perfect, you will inadvertently, listen, striving for perfection is a great thing, but you will inadvertently create an environment where people are afraid to own up to mistakes. And guess what happens when you create that environment? Nobody's learning. Nobody's learning, nobody's growing, everybody's pointing the finger and blaming each other. It doesn't help anybody. So we need to create an environment where there isn't, like, I love this, relief after success. Have you ever been in an environment where you just get something done and it works and you're like, thank God that is over, and thank God it worked, because otherwise I would be screwed. I'd probably be on my way out of here. This is terrible. So we need to create an environment where excellence is absolutely demanded. It's demanded. And we also understand that when we have a failure, we need to be able to disengage a little bit and then re-engage and learn. So instead of blaming and pointing fingers, not effective. So how do we foster more of this intrinsic motivation on our teams? That is really the biggest thing that we work with a lot of folks on when we're talking about this motivation stuff. We need to do a few different things. And so the self-determination theory was originally in a theory from the 1970s. It didn't catch on until many years later, however. And there was the original publishers were Edward Deci and Richard Ryan, and they were behavioral scientists and created this theory, and several actually mini theories which are within the theory. We're going to keep it high level today, but what is very exciting about this theory is that it really helps us understand what are the kinds of things that we need to do as leaders to create the environment where people are getting more intrinsic motivation, because intrinsic motivation is that kind of motivation that's self-sustaining. We can only do so much with the external motivation. Now, we need to get people excited. We can set those standards of excellence. We need to get people actually excited about following them. Those are two things that go together. So first thing in SDT is that we need, as leaders, need to create an environment where autonomy is given to people. So autonomy, if you don't know the definition, it's what we are, it's the feeling of somebody that they have the ability to choose what they're doing, when they're doing it, why they're doing it. So that's really a powerful thing. And they have ultimately ownership of that outcome. So that's what autonomy is. We're choosing what we're doing and when we're doing it. So it's a little bit more of self-determination, if you follow. So the next thing is competence. This is somebody's ability to actually feel like, hey, I have the skills to do this. Now, in our exercise later on, we're going to talk a little bit about what you might feel when you don't feel very competent. So that's going to be a helpful reflection, I think. Finally, we have relatedness. If people don't connect with the greater reason that they're doing something, they don't have nearly as much energy to keep going after it. That intrinsic motivation is not there because they don't get, what does this mean? And, you know, there's Simon Sinek is such a great leader in this area because his movement around your why is so powerfully igniting this sense of relatedness that we can generate for our people. So that's really why I'd start with why it works, is because it's talking to relatedness. So there are a couple other ways that people refer to these things. There's Daniel Pink in the early 2000s wrote a book called Drive, and he refers to them as autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So you could say that. We like to refer to it a lot of the times as autonomy, mastery, and connection. So that sense of relatedness is connectedness. So that's how we think about it. And there's lots of this work is out there, so you can start looking into resources, how to use it for yourself in addition to this. So we wanted to talk a little bit about how we can bolster all these things. So first, we're going to start about talking with fostering autonomy. And the biggest thing for us when we talk about this is that everybody in your organization has a bit of genius, and we need to bring it out as leaders, and we need to give them the keys and say, you're so good at this, you go, you drive, we're just happy that you're here. And there's a great Steve Jobs quote that refers to this, and he says, we don't hire smart people at Apple so that we can tell them what to do. We hire smart people at Apple so that they can tell us what to do. This quote just stuck with me so much because it's an example of really powerful leadership, because it is giving people autonomy. It is literally saying to somebody coming in your door, we need your help to figure this out. Could you just get after it and let us know what you find? That is autonomy. This is it is the biggest company by market capitalization in the world right now. And that is an incredible autonomous culture that they've built. Amazing leadership. So one of the things from the practical perspective, as we're getting into the practical perspective from the theoretical, is that when you're in an autonomous organization, employees have the opportunity to give their input about what expectations are and how they should be met. So we go through an exercise with customers during our onboarding process where they develop guiding principles. We always describe the guiding principles as behaviors that are related to a core value. So description of the core value in practice. So whatever that might look like. So if your core value is integrity, what does that mean on the daily basis? What behaviors are demonstrating that your team has integrity? Everybody might have different expectations about what those are. So we need to discuss that as a team, get everyone's input. That's a basic example. So we also want to give our employees the ability to determine what they're doing a little bit on a day-to-day basis. So if there's certain things that we need to, if the product team is saying, hey, we need to prioritize these features, might get them together with the sales team and say, you guys figure that out. Figure out what needs to go in what direction. That sense of autonomy is really powerful. And we also, as leadership, you might send out a survey and ask, what should we do? Then listen to that and speak to people in the language of choice, which is always, we asked you, and this is what you said, and this is what we're doing. So that is the language of choice, saying to somebody, this is what you told us to do. So we gave you a choice, you answered, here you go. So we also wanted to just touch on the fact that if total openness is not always appropriate, but maybe there are some things in the company plan, the roadmap, that you can say, maybe it would be okay if either of these things came first. What do you think? Like maybe if leadership really does need to set the course of everything and have a really, really purposeful, like we're doing things this way because this is what we need. Maybe there are some smaller level things. Maybe it's not always the direction of everything that needs to be done, but maybe it's smaller decisions that get to be made. No matter what, we're looking for opportunities to give people the chance to exercise some autonomy. So ultimately, this all comes back to the sense of trust that leadership is going to have with their team, because we need to make sure that we ultimately are going to get out of the way as leaders. And that's one of the hardest things for leaders to do well, but it's also one of the most powerful when it's done right. And if we think about a big company, a giant company like Blackstone has so many different business units. And the CEO there, Steven Schwartzman, he does not probably have a day-to-day understanding of what's going on in every department, but he knows that the department heads, he trusts them. He knows that they're very competent. He knows that if he gives them autonomy, they're going to run with it. And he can run a absolutely massive organization because of that sense of autonomy and giving those people the ability to drive their business unit and decide what's best for it and what's ultimately going to contribute the most to their company. So very powerful example of leadership as well. Now we're also thinking about competence, and this is really, really, the skill development piece is so common in HR, and that's really, really important because skill development is one of the most valuable things we can do as a company. However, we also need to consider what kinds of skills maybe are getting swept under the rug. We like to think of a lot of the times businesses that we support have first-time managers. First-time managers are not always given the best training on how to be a great manager. They're usually top performers in their role, and that's a great thing. However, they are not always taught this is what you need to do to be a really effective leader of people. So that's an example. We need to ask as the leaders, we need to take the responsibility to ask, does this person really have all the skills that they need to be successful in this role? So that is a very compelling example. Now, the other thing with competence is that we really need to approach developing competence from a positive reinforcement angle. That's how we learn things best. And there's room for negative reinforcement as well. Obviously, we're not going to just have everything be all sunshine and rainbows all the time. There are real consequences when things go wrong. However, if we take our negative feedback too far, it becomes a demotivator. And at worst, it can really disengage people. Because if they feel like they're not getting the support that they need and they're constantly receiving negative feedback, that person is going to be checked out long before you end up firing them. So this is something that we need a system to do this. You need a practice that says, when we come into a scenario where there's a performance issue, we need a way of talking about this with people that helps diagnose what happened and helps them come to the next best action to develop their competence. Because it needs to be something that they're realizing, this is what I missed. And if they don't realize it, maybe I can help them realize it for themselves. That's what great coaching, that's what great mentorship, that's what great leadership is. So we need to be able to say to them, let's look at what happened here. What do you think? And we also, as part of that, need to say, maybe this is something that went well in the past. What happened this time? What did you do differently? Let's figure it out. So that's what great competence management looks like. Now, just again, the focus on the process is a way to make this seem a whole lot more fair and equal, and it is a way to make it be more fair and equal. If you are having inconsistent application of certain tools and practices, people are going to feel singled out. So we don't want that. We want to create a system for developing competence that involves training, a practice for feedback, and ongoing support for people so that we can actually help them grow. And that's a wish that it was more prevalent, but if you're watching this video, you're one of those people who are out there making it more prevalent. So we're grateful to be here with you. Finally, we have relatedness. And this is once again just related to that why, the reason that we're doing something. And that is super powerful. It's super powerful. And I have in a previous company worked in the medical device space. And one of the coolest things I always found about the company culture of med device companies in general, the people that we would meet from lots of different parts of that field, is that people are really connected. And one of the reasons why people go into that field and oftentimes take a pay cut to do so is because they want their work to have an immediate tangible benefit on people. And it's really easy to see that in the medical device space, because what you're building is going on somebody's chest, it's going in somebody's blood, it's going in a moment where they're so vulnerable and they're so maybe even afraid of what's going to happen for them. Your work is able to immediately create that impact. And so no matter what industry that you're in, think about pitching this to people. Think about, how can I talk to our customers and then bring those stories back to our team? Because we need to let people know what we're doing is benefiting them. And no matter if you're a company that is a mortgage originator, talk about people who are really happy in the homes that you got them. If you are a banker, talk about your small business finance, what that's enabling for people. And if you're a tech company, go and find out what kind of results that people are getting with your product. So there are tons of different ways that we can talk about create that sense of relatedness and connection that we have with our customers, with the people that we serve ultimately in our business. And to have those anecdotal and if quantitative, if you can, demonstrations is super valuable. And that is really bringing it back to that mission, that vision, those values, and the guiding principles, and the why behind your business, what your business does. Now, on top of that, we also need to really relate all that stuff to an individual. And we see this shift happening in the talent marketplace today. People want to work for a business that is investing in them as much as they're investing in it. So we need to actually take the time as leaders to ask people, what are your goals? What are your dreams? What are the hopes that you have as part of working for us? Because if we can do that really, really effectively, we can go in and completely grab somebody's commitment. We can make them understand, we can help them see we are going to do something for you. We want you to grow from this experience as well as you contribute to us. That's an exchange. We're going to reciprocate beyond this extrinsic motivation of, hey, you're going to get paid while you're here. So we're creating more intrinsic motivation by understanding what are this individual's goals, hopes, dreams, whatever they are, and how can we support them in growing towards those. And ultimately, aligning those two things. What are our business goals? What are this person's goals? Let's try to get those lined up wherever we can as much as possible. And that is going to create somebody who is much more loyal. It's going to create somebody who's much more engaged. It's going to create somebody who is really motivated to do more because they see how it's benefiting them and benefiting others as through their work. So we had this cool chart that we found from the American psychologist. And what we wanted to just show you is how these things can happen from left to right. So if we have a motivation on the left, which is non-self-determined at all, like this is just somebody who's completely checked out, you can see that their regulatory style, which is describing how one might manage, like this is what we're thinking for regulatory style, is what kind of management is happening. This person is not regulated. They have nothing going on in their life. And the source of their motivation is very impersonal. It's not they have maybe reason to believe that that life's more meaningless, so they don't have very much motivation. And really, what happens in this is that they feel a sense of extreme incompetence a lot of the time. So when people are feeling that sense of extreme incompetence, they give up, and that's a really powerless situation to be in. Something that is not great to feel. So that's something to really think about. And we're going to talk about that in the coaching context in a second. But we have then moving to external regulation. So this is rules, rewards, punishments. We do see a lot of this in the workplace. And going down the line, we can also see that introjected regulation would involve how we see ourselves. So that's just living up to our ego's idea of what we should be doing. You know, a lot of statements like that, I should, or maybe I won't be good enough if I don't, something like that. So when we're moving towards that somewhat internal, we're saying like, I think that I should do this just because it's important to, so starting to add a little bit more of that element of values towards it, and going to that integrated regulation, which still exists within extrinsic motivation, but really this is one of the sweet spots that we have for business. If we're thinking on the far left, this is where we want to stay out of, and then moving towards the right is something that we can say is more positive for business and us as leaders. We can say that the internal awareness is saying, this is something that I do because it's aligned with what I want. That's that question of how can we line up our business priorities and our person, and a person who's in front of me, who am I supporting, what their priorities are. And finally, going to that intrinsic regulation, which is something saying like, I'm just doing this for fun. So that's total intrinsic motivation. And maybe we don't always get there as part of the business environment, but we're trying to move towards that as much as we can. Now, we're going to get into our exercise here. So I want you to take a minute and think about a time at work when you didn't feel like you had the skills to complete a task. Think about a time at work when you didn't feel like you have any say over what's happening. Think about a time when you're at work when you had no idea why you were doing something. We often lovingly call this WTF syndrome. And I want you to think of that as we're thinking about it, as you're thinking about it, about your motivation level and what you might have how you might have reacted if you were doing this for a longer period of time. Also, very important, were you doing your best work when this was going on? So think about that for yourself. Go ahead and pause the video if you need. And we have a lot of different situations that come up as you're thinking of these. So what we always like to think of is when we're assessing motivation issues, we need to look at the behaviors of the person that's right in front of us. So when we're assessing motivation issues, we need to look at the behavior of this person that's right in front of us. And what we need to do is address some of those motivation issues by asking questions. So we need to look at, okay, what is going on? What is this type of person? So if this person is refusing to attempt something, or if they seem like they're really hesitant, they're procrastinating a lot, that might be related to competence because they feel like they can't do it. They don't know what to do. They're overwhelmed, and so they're freezing. It's that fight, flight, or freeze. If somebody is having a really strong emotional response to what's happening with work, maybe they feel like if they're getting overwhelmed, they're like, I just can't do it. I just can't do it. Maybe we need to work on their competence with them. So looking at the behavior and saying, trying to just use this as a model to diagnose what's going on. So for autonomy, you might see somebody who's maybe a little bit antagonistic, like not wanting to give it up. Maybe they're very stubborn. But how we might just understand that in the context of self-determination theory is them feeling like they don't have the autonomy to do what they want. They need that sense of autonomy in order to feel fulfilled in what they're doing. So if we don't give them the opportunity to make decisions, we're constantly asking them to comply with us, we're giving them no opportunity. Over time, that's going to build resentment. People don't like to be told what to do, even if they're at work. And that's just the way it needs to go sometimes. We're trying to get away from that model. Now, diagnosing a problem through a lens of self-determination theory related to relevance, that could be looking at somebody or maybe an employee that seems like they're bored. Maybe they're just, doing a decent job on the assignment, but not really blowing your mind. They're not connecting some of the dots that you thought they might connect. That could be related to their sense of connectedness or relevance of that project to the greater whole. So it could be great to work with them on, what does this mean for our company? What does this mean for the customers that we serve? These kinds of questions. You're looking at the behavior, trying to ask questions to determine what's going on for this person. And we're using self-determination theory as a framework to help understand and diagnose what's happening. We're looking at, is this a competence issue? Is this an autonomy issue? Or is it a relevance issue? So we also we hope this was helpful for you. And we also wanted to end on a note that is related to attunement in coaching. And attunement in coaching is something that is really related to effectiveness of coaching. And that's when we allow our internal state to mirror somebody else. We have these mirror neurons in our brains. One of the reasons why humans have been able to be become as widespread of a species as we have. It's because of these mirror neurons. We can emotionally relate to each other. So a great coach is going to hold their own space and make sure that they're grounded and knows what to do and is in charge of the situation. But they're also going to allow themselves to connect with that person. And one of the ways that we can do that is to make them feel felt through the use of these mirror neurons. So we're going on that journey with somebody as their coach and as their mentor. So your failures or your employees' failures, I want you to feel those too. If they are really struggling with something, understand like this is something that they really need your support on. And in order to make them feel the most supported that you can, this is how to do it. We need to attune to them. So when we're asking these questions about what's going on for you, I'm seeing this behavior. Is this related to your competence? Is this related to your autonomy? Is this related to your relatedness? Those kinds of things we need to feel into as well as ask those questions. That's what really we can do to turbocharge all of this. So we hope that this was really helpful for you today. We welcome you back to another session in a following week. We have some great interviews with some really cool people coming up. And we're really excited to keep sharing coaching and employee development information with you. So thank you very much for being here, and we will see you again very, very soon.